Hello everyone and welcome back to our adventures in Egypt. Well, today we're going to show you some amazing engineering marvels. We're going to start off in the area of Aswan and show you the Aswan High Dam, one of the largest earthen dams ever constructed. After that, we're going to show you an engineering project that the whole world had to come together to move an entire temple complex from one island to another to prevent it from flooding caused by the Aswan Dam. After that, we're going to take and show you exactly how did the ancient Egyptians carve those massive granite obelisks. We're going to expose that mystery and let you in on the secrets. And finally, after all that, we take a relaxing and beautiful felucca ride on the Nile River at sunset.
Well, there's one more thing. It was your birthday.
It was.
So friends, you're going to want to see how we celebrated his birthday on a Nile River cruise. Welcome to Living Phase 2.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Nancy, and we're empty nesters striving to live life to the fullest.
And we are living that full life, traveling through the Middle East and Egypt and sharing that adventure with you.
Well, we sure are, friends. And before we get started on this adventure, we need to reflect back just briefly on our previous video where we asked you a question. If you could tell what was wrong with this carving. Now, our guide had asked us, and you had the answer, and he said you were one of the only people that have figured it out.
At least right away.
Yeah, so you won like an Egyptian dollar, which is the equivalent of about
like
20 cents.
Yeah.
Well, what is wrong with this carving is the hands, the thumbs were all both on the same side. So you can see here that he didn't really have a left hand or a right hand.
Yeah.
Things were wrong on the thumbs.
Yeah,
so
they put the
hand
thumb
position.
on the Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. You talk to people who are artists, who do drawings, who do paintings, carvings. They always say the hands are one of the hardest things to draw. And so obviously, as this person was carving, you know, that he had trouble there as well too. So we do want to thank everyone that submitted their guess, and to those of you that got the the thumbs on the wrong side, the dual thumbs, congratulations to you. We appreciate you submitting all those comments.
We hope you had fun with that. Well, we're in Aswan. We're here for 2 days. We have an overnight here. And so our guide and us, we got off of our riverboat and there was a driver waiting for us. That's one of the nice things about going with a tour company. They arrange everything. So that driver is now going to be with us for the next 2 days. And he is going to take us to the Aswan High Dam for us to take a little tour of. And as we're going there, we pass by the Aswan Low Dam.
Yeah, so that was the first dam that was built. It was built between 1898 and 1902, if I got my numbers right. And it was built by the British when they were occupying Egypt at that time. They originally, and it's the same reason they built the Aswan High Dam later in the 1960s, is the reason that they built it was to try to control the flooding of the Nile. If you remember from our video on the hot air balloon, we showed you all the fertility around the Nile. Well, every year the Nile would flood and recede and flood and recede. And, you know, it has some benefits. It does bring fertility. It brings that silt and it brings, you know, that fertile soil up from the Nile Basin into the croplands, and it would irrigate those lands naturally and all that would happen. But the downside of that is you could never control this flooding. You would have people's homes and businesses and ancient Egyptian ruins and everything would be flooded. And so they eventually decided that the benefit of controlling the Nile was higher than the downside of not having that more natural irrigation and things that went with it. So the British originally did it with the Low Dam, and you can see that, you know, that here it was quite large. Then 7 kilometers upstream is when the Egyptians built the Aswan High Dam.
One of the first things that we see is a large monument. Now, this monument was dedicated to the Soviet Union, who at the time helped them to build this dam.
Right. So the international relations were kind of interesting, we'll say, at the time that they were trying to get this dam built. Originally, Egypt actually did want the United States to help them with a World Bank loan to help build this Aswan Dam. However, there was a lot of environmental concerns. We just talked about that, about the Nile flooding and what's going on with that. What was it going to flood upstream? How many Egyptian artifacts were going to be lost when they created what eventually was called Lake Nasser. And so with all that conflict, Egypt ended up going to the Soviet Union, who was more than happy to take on a project that the United States wasn't exactly behind at the time. And so the Soviet Union actually helped with the engineering, the funding, and construction of the Aswan High Dam. So that's why you have that monument that's still here today. But in the end, of course, the dam did get built, and fortunately, we do have very good, from the United States standpoint, very good relations with Egypt at this time.
So when we arrived here at the dam, you do have to go through security, but once you pass through security, you can walk out onto the dam, you can take some great pictures. And at the time that it was built, it was the largest earthen dam, and still to this day, in addition to controlling the Nile flooding, it is used for electricity and as a water reservoir for irrigation purposes.
You can see these pictures. I mean, Lake Nasser is the lake that was created that's back behind the Aswan High Dam. It is quite a sight to see. Beautiful lake. The dam, of course, is quite the engineering marvel. Now, there were, as we said, a lot of implications. It's one of the reasons the United States wasn't originally behind the building of the dam. And when you look out there at Lake Nasser, try to imagine there are actually dozens, if not hundreds, of Egyptian tombs and temples and artifacts that are all underwater in this lake. There was quite an impact from that. Now, what you're going to see next, that we're going to go to here in a few minutes, we'll get to, is one of the temples that was saved from this flooding, and we're going to show you that in a few minutes. Well, let me ask you, Nancy, what did you think of visiting the high dam here?
Well, I mean, honestly, it was okay. I mean, this was probably one stop we could have missed on the whole tour. If we were going to pick a stop to miss, this would be one of them.
Yeah, and as many of you know, I was a former aerospace engineer, so these engineering projects really, I kind of geek out on them a little bit, but I would agree 100% with you. You have to, every trip you have to pick and choose. I think this is one, unless you're really interested in seeing the Aswan High Dam, that you probably could miss. Now,
that said, though, it was near the Philae Temple. So,
exactly.
I mean, if you're going to go to the Philae Temple, which you should go to, you might as well see the dam as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. No. But as you said, we left the Aswan High Dam and we began heading to the Philae Temple.
So we drove from the Aswan High Dam now to a boat dock, and at this boat dock is where there's lots of boat taxis. Again, our tour company had arranged a boat taxi for us that was just for us. So it was just you and Mike and I on this boat, and this boat taxi driver is the one who took us there, and he's the one who brought us back. So we didn't have to wait on anyone, which was really quite a nice advantage.
Well, it was quite a nice boat ride. It probably took about, 15 minutes to get out there. You could see the temple in the distance, and as you're going around the island, it was a really nice trip. I enjoyed that a lot. This is very unique. You're not just walking up to a temple or driving up, you're actually having to get on a boat, and it kind of made for a little adventure. But we arrived on the island of Agilia. So the temple, as Nancy said, was originally on the island of Philae. And that's how the temple got its name. But because of the Aswan High Dam construction, as we mentioned, the world came together. All the UNESCO countries that are part of UNESCO came together, and they said, we need to save this temple. And so they all, came up with different engineering, different funding, different work, and they worked together. So they actually built a cofferdam all the way around Philae Island to prevent the water from getting on the island. And then they began disassembling the Philae Temple and then moving it over to the other island, which was actually about 13 meters higher than Philae Island.
Now, this was quite a feat because it was 40,000 blocks of temple that they had to move, and it was over 20,000 tons. Now, when you look at the temple, if you look closely, you can see some of the cut lines, but if you didn't know it had been moved, you wouldn't notice these cut lines at all. They did a great job moving it.
Oh, absolutely. If our guide had just never said anything that, it used to be on that island and now it's on this island, honestly, you wouldn't even know. And by the way, you're going to see something similar in tomorrow's video or the next video for Abu Simbel. So be sure to stay tuned for that one. And how will they know when that video is released?
Well, friends, you will have subscribed and you'll have turned on those notifications. And so we appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you think the effort they put into moving the Philae Temple was impressive, wait till you see that about Abu Simbel on our next video. Well, as we said, we began walking around the Philae Temple complex. Our guide took us to the center of the temple, and here you can see some beautiful carvings of the goddess Isis.
And we went to one of the most famous places here, the Gates of Hadrian. You can get some beautiful pictures here. It just overlooks the Nile.
We continued exploring around. One of the things that Isis is the goddess of is music, and we saw some musical instruments dedicated to her carved into the temple. We continued walking and exploring the complex. And enjoying the beautiful views out over the Nile River on this island.
It was time for us to leave and get back to our boat so we could get to the mainland. And on the boat ride, it was really quite nice. We could see the Gates of Hadrian from the Nile side now.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, being able to see it from both sides.
Yes, yes. And we also saw a Philae guest house. So you could stay here, friends, if you wanted to stay right here on the Nile River. They have a hotel here.
Well, that was a really nice boat ride. I enjoyed, that was a different experience, and I really enjoyed that, being out on the water. But we docked, and when we got off, of course, we've mentioned this before, there's a lot of people selling things. And well, this one caught my eye, and so I actually did get a map of the Nile River and all of the different different things that you can see on it. Let me see if I can get it on here. So this is a huge map, and it shows all the different temples and tombs and everything along the Nile River. And so I paid a whopping $1 for this. I bought it from a little
US
vendor
dollar.
there. So if you find something you like, negotiate a little bit. I think they actually started at like $8. And so, but you could tell what other people were paying for it.
And your guide will help you negotiate as well.
He will. Well, we got back in the car. Now this was where our guide said, hey, we've got some extra time. We can take you back to the, to the riverboat because we have something else planned later in the afternoon. But since we had a little bit of time, he said, well, would you like to go to the quarry of the unfinished obelisk? And then we said, well, that sounds great to us. Sure, let's go for it. So we drove over there, we got out, and this ended up being honestly one of my favorite stops.
You really enjoyed this. You enjoyed the engineering marvel that this was to create an obelisk.
Yeah. So what this is, it's a granite quarry. There's many of these, we've mentioned that before, there's many of these granite and sandstone, limestone quarries around this area that all of the Egyptians, the pharaohs, used to build their temples. This one in particular, though, this granite was used to build obelisks. So, the famous, massive obelisk that you'd see out in front of temples, that's what they used this quarry for, to carve out this granite so they could build them. Well, what is so fascinating about this particular granite quarry is the Pharaoh Hatshepsut. If you go back and remember our video with the balloon ride, we went and saw her temple. Well, she wanted two of the largest obelisks ever constructed to be in front of her temple. So she challenged them to carve these obelisks. And as they were carving them, they found their limitations. They really did. So they were carving out this obelisk and it cracked. So they couldn't finish it. They couldn't take it out. So what they did, they just left it. So we can actually see how the Egyptians carved these obelisks, the tools they used, the methods they used. So now we really do understand it's not a mystery. We understand how they did all this granite work and how they carved these obelisks, how they would take them from the quarry out onto the Nile River in boats and transport them up and down the Nile to take them to the different areas.
They must have been so disappointed when that cracked, because I'm sure it probably was years of work
Yeah.
maybe to
Yeah.
carve as much as they had carved already. Gosh.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. Well, in addition, part of that mystery is, well, this is granite. It's one of the hardest rocks. How did they carve granite without modern day tools? Well, they simply used a harder rock.
Yeah, the harder rock that they used is called dolerite, and you can see me picking it up here, and it is rather heavy.
It was very heavy. Yeah. So they would carve that into tools, and then they would use that to chip away at the granite, to polish the granite. We walked all throughout this complex. Now, you had your hiking poles with you.
And I was glad that I did. I always asked my guide at each destination, should I bring my walking sticks along? And he'd let me know if there were going to be a lot of stairs or not. And this was a good place to have them.
Yeah, because we had some nice overlooks. You had to climb quite a ways up at this quarry, and you're kind of stepping over uneven ground. I mean, it's a quarry. You're going up where they carved the granite out. But I enjoyed that a lot. It was not originally on our itinerary, but we would certainly recommend, if you're in the area of Aswan, have your tour company or make sure you make it over.
Time.
Yeah, to the quarry of the unfinished obelisk. I found it just amazing.
Well, we finished up at the granite quarry of the unfinished obelisk. It was time to head back to our river cruise for lunch. And as we're driving back, we did see an interesting truck that had, I think it was a lot of styrofoam that was just stacked precariously on this truck.
I think the lesson is always have your camera ready.
That's
you never
right.
know what you're going to see.
That is so true. Well, we got on board and had a nice buffet lunch. And one of the things you might see me wearing here is my cartouche t-shirt. It was a souvenir that I had gotten while on board the cruise ship. They were selling these, and it has my name in the hieroglyphic letters Nancy. So I had ordered it the first day of the river cruise, and they had delivered it to us today. So that was it's kind of a nice souvenir for $15. Can't beat it. Well, we relaxed on board up on the fifth deck, up on the sun deck for a while, and then it was getting time for our Felucca ride. So this was a fun thing to do, especially on your birthday, to go on a nice sailboat on the Nile River.
Yeah, I think that, any Nile cruise or trip to Egypt really isn't complete without a Felucca ride, right? And so for those that may not know, a Felucca is a traditional Egyptian sailboat. It has a large large triangular sail. It's a wooden boat. Ours was captained by, let's just say, a young crew.
Okay, they were 16. The pilot of the sailboat and his helper, they were like 15 and 16 years old, so they were very, very young. But they had grown up on the water, and they had grown up sailing, and for the most part, they did a pretty good job.
They did. Well, we'll show you here at the end of our cruise where they made a little bit of a mistake. But overall, you're right. They did a great job.
They really did. And honestly, it was beautiful to see the Nile at sunset.
Well, here, take a look at the wonderful sailing we had.
That was really beautiful. And here at sunset, it was just really pretty. Well, now as we're kind of wrapping things up and heading back towards our river cruise, they open up the gift shop, which that is a table that was on the sailboat here that had their wares that they were selling. They had various things that they had covered with a cloth, but they removed the cloth and opened things up. And I purchased a couple of pieces of jewelry. They had a little necklace here and a bracelet, and both together were $5 US.
So as Nancy was saying, we're heading back in. Now there's as you've heard, as I say before, there's many, many of these riverboats, and they're stacked, one on top of the other. So we had to go around the back side of some of these riverboats to where the dock was. And this is where maybe the youth of our boat pilots here came into play. They didn't quite bring us in, complete. In fact, we bumped into the back of one riverboat and kind of went around another one, and we had to push with a stick off to another one. So
I'm afraid some of those riverboat people
Captains,
they were kind of laughing at our, our little sailboat.
That's right. They were like, "What are you kids doing?" But we made it back safe. There was never a problem. We weren't ever in any danger or anything. It was, in fact, it just added to the experience.
That's right.
Got a story to tell there. When things go really smoothly and perfectly, you don't have the best stories. It's when things go wrong that you have the better stories. Well, we got off our felucca. We did tip the young men, as you do, tip everybody here in Egypt, and walked back over to our riverboat.
Well, once we got back to the riverboat, now it is time for dinner. And so we went down to dinner, and again, very nice buffet that they had for us. But for dessert, they had something special.
They did.
Since it was Mike's birthday, they come out and they are dancing and singing and clapping and saying happy birthday and over and over and over.
It just went on and on and on.
We got up and I had a little bit of dancing there. They had brought you out a nice sized cake that they let you cut, and then they put the rest of the cake up on the buffet so everyone could share.
Yeah, that cake was way too big for two of us.
Yes.
But that was nice. They did a very
sweet.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you arranged it because I didn't say anything to them. So.
I actually had asked the guy. I had actually asked our guide. I said tomorrow or the next day is Mike's birthday. I said, is there anything that we could do throughout this whole day that would be a little special for your birthday? And he said, I know it's his birthday. They're going to do something at dinner. So he had told me that ahead of time.
Nice. So that it was, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate
You're welcome.
Well, after our very nice birthday and all that dancing and singing, they actually had a whirling dervish come on board.
They did. They did that. This was pretty cool. If you've never seen a whirling dervish before, they spin and spin and spin. And I don't know how they keep from getting dizzy.
It's the spin that never ends.
But their outfits, their costumes just fly out to the side and had lights and lots of colors. And he just spun around. This was in the lounge area to all the different tables. Well, that was a lot of fun. And of course, as he went to each table, he's asking for tips. And we told you in a previous video, you just need to be prepared to tip everyone here in Egypt. That's just kind of to be expected.
Well, it was a very, very nice birthday between the Philae Temple and the Aswan Dam and the unfinished obelisk and the cake and of course the Felucca right at sunset. So we hope you enjoyed our adventure today in Egypt, and we've got plenty more coming up as we move forward. Tomorrow we're going to see, you will absolutely recognize this, the Abu Simbel Temple. This is incredibly famous, and we've got some great stories to tell how they saved this temple from the flooding after the building of the Aswan Dam. And then we leave our river cruise and we take a flight to Cairo, where we are going to have our first glimpse of the great pyramids of Egypt.
You're not going to want to miss it, friends. So we'll see you very soon. Have a beautiful day. Take care. Bye-bye now.